expected. And it appeared that trouble was there in your path. One of the earliest of my disappointments happened when I was a teacher in Bellevue, Kentucky. On that particular time in my life, I thought, because others around me seemed to think, that I was the right person and well liked enough to be the president of the local Bellevue PTA. But when it came the day of election, there was a motion from the floor for a second candidate to that office, and I was defeated. At the time, I took that very personally, as though there was something wrong with me, and people didn't like me, and I could think of all of the things in the world why I wasn't elected as a president at that time. But interestingly enough, and to my good fortune, which at the time I didn't know, there was later a problem within the organization, but it wasn't on my plate or at my table, and I didn't have to deal with it. And as I began to reflect on that, I realized that I had been fortunate not to be elected. Now, character, though, is a building process, and there are other disappointments that come along. After teaching, I decided and became a part of Prudential Insurance as a salesman. And I thought I could make money selling insurance, life insurance in particular. That was all at the time, that was all that Prudential sold, was life insurance. And so I joined the Prudential Life Insurance Company and went into an office in downtown Cincinnati in a high-rise. And I began to try to make contact with people and set up appointments to see them and sell insurance. And for about 2 years, I did my best to sell insurance. But I was not an insurance salesman. And when I got the check for $23 for my last week of employment, of course I was disappointed, but a great deal of that was my own fault because I hadn't sold any insurance. And I was about to be fired. So I had to do something. And being fired or relieved of your duties meant that I had to look for other employment. And I did. At that time, there was a headhunter, an organization that was looking for people for sales positions in other fields. And there was a pharmaceutical company who was looking for salespeople. And I interviewed with that sales company through the headhunter. And I went into the pharmaceutical business as a sales representative for Rucker Pharmaceutical Company and was moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana. The only rule they had was they couldn't take more than $1 million in profit sharing when you left. And I thought, that's money. I'll be all right here, you know. So I moved to Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I began to make money. In fact, my wife said it was the only time in her life when she felt she could go out and buy anything she wanted. But after 2 years, I was not satisfied. In fact, I was very unhappy. I came to the conclusion that money wasn't everything. And it didn't make that much difference. And what I wanted to do was to be of service to people. And though my father had been a minister, and I had thought I'd never want to be a minister, I ended up going back to school, to seminary, to become a minister. And I served a church, a little church of 20 people in Albany, Kentucky, and became very successful and grew the church to 75 or 80 people on Sunday morning. So this church in Irvine, Kentucky called me and said, well, hey, we want you to come and be our minister. And I thought, well, I'm ready to go. And so I went to this new church, and within 18 months they were ready to fire me. In fact, I got a letter from them saying, we don't think we could work with you anymore, you need to leave. And it was a real struggle. For me, it was another disappointment, and I began to look at myself and say, well, what's wrong with me? What have I done? Why do these people not like me? Blah, 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 on and on about me. And out of that experience, I did some things which were inappropriate, I think, in the pulpit, and I used the pulpit as a bully pulpit on occasion, and that was inappropriate. And I learned from that experience. I set out from there and spent 17 years in Carthage, Illinois as a minister of that congregation. I grew spiritually, and I grew wise in my understanding and process of things. I had other disappointments. I had a woman come in and tell me I'd preached the poorest sermon she had ever heard. At that point, I agreed with her because it was one of the poorest sermons I'd ever preached, but anyway. And then I thought, I want a real challenge, and I went to a church over in Macon, Missouri, and I was really challenged at that church in Macon, Missouri. It was a difficult situation. There were those who didn't think I was an appropriate minister for that congregation. And within a few years, I was asked to leave, and I agreed to leave. But I didn't do what I'd done in the past to use the pulpit as a bully for myself. I left with my character intact, and it was a growing experience. Most of these events I have learned something from in my life, and they have been a part of who and what I am, and the way in which I responded, and I had a choice. But it took me a while to learn how to choose to respond properly to the situations that I found myself in. We do have a choice. We have a choice in how we respond to those around us when they disappoint us. We can ask the question, what's wrong with me? Or we can say, what's next for me? And how do I want to come out of this? Do I want to come out of it in a positive way? Or do I want to come out of it in a negative way? Madam Toastmaster.